I now invite Dr. Ajit Balakrishnan to share his thoughts and ideas on his designated topic, the coming algorithmic financial regulatory era. Ajit.
Okay. Can you see my screen? Can you see my screen?
I can, yes. I hope.
And you can hear my voice clearly?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, here it is. I have 9 slides, so it won't take too long. Okay. Right now, the most important thing to note is that technology is racing through the financial world. And what earlier was seen as call options and volatility, etc., insider trading, etc., 3 big things are about to take over. One is blockchain. In my humble opinion, the most important technological breakthroughs for the last 100 years. And algorithmic trading and Bitcoin, which is one simple implementation of blockchain, but blockchain has many more implications. So together with that, we've started appearance of unicorns, etc., etc. So both Wall Street and Dalal Street, which is the Indian version of Wall Street, are going to look very different, according to me, in a few months. Okay, now, yeah.
Ajit, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Are you sharing your screen? Are you sharing slides, or are you just narrating?
No, you're not able to see my screen?
No, I'm able to see you, but I'm not able.
No, I'm sorry, there's something, I'm so sorry about it. Let me just, okay, oh God. Now is it any better? You can see?
Yes, we're getting.
Yes.
You're getting it?
Yes, it's not a full screen. It's sort of truncated.
Yeah, I will make it full in no time. To 1 sec. Okay. Okay. Now you can see. Hello. You can see full screen.
Bottom half. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm not getting it correctly, but I can only see the bottom half. So I can see the substance of your slide. But
you can't. What about others? Nobody else can see either?
I can see it all.
I can see the slide, yes.
I can see.
Yeah.
It's full screen now, Ajit.
It is full screen, right?
Yes.
It's okay, yeah.
Then why? Okay, so shall I proceed?
Proceed, please.
Yeah. You see the screen fully now, right? Technology is racing through the financial world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Sahu, you can see it?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, I can see.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm saying,
financial world, but not the academic world.
Yeah. Okay, the blockchain is the single most important breakthrough happening. I take it from me. I'm a guy who writes Python code for 5 hours a day. So it is as important as TCP/IP, and it's going to change the game, particularly in the financial world. Okay. Now here is, I hope this is a very important screen. You can see that, right, Dr. Sahu? Yes. Yeah. The fintech startup are coming and disaggregating the financial industry, and it's very important. Now, I've just shown one slide from a very insightful site called CB Insights, and you can see the Indian fintech market as it's evolving. There are several hundred fintech companies being funded and taking off. And like the old, media companies were disaggregated and the retail companies like Walmart were disaggregated, a similar movement is happening in the fintech area, and the big banks that we know of, in my considered opinion, won't exist after another 5 to 6 years. Okay, very important that we worry about all these things. More tech revolutions are coming underway: deep learning, machine learning, artificial intelligence, etc. Almost I'm follow every day. Even when I read for 2 hours of journals every day, I still can't keep up. But nonetheless, now here is. I'm giving you an example of something. My dog. I'm sorry, my dog is calling for attention. No. For example, with some data, with 4 lines of code, in Python, I'm able to find out who are the various groups playing around together in the Bombay Stock Exchange. Just 4 lines of code. Okay, now what has happened is a new tech called graph databases have come in. Some example I show below. Network X is one, Neo4j, Cassandra. There are several, but I work with Network X mainly because it is open source. It is possible to instantly detect communities within huge databases. And now, why this is important that everyone in this team understand this is that we all grew up in the world of relational databases, and then we went to NoSQL databases. The graph databases looks at the relationships. So inside here, my code was to find out what are the main nodes, and then check for the degree centrality. The words like properties like degree centrality of a node tells you who is acting in concert with who, and so on and so forth. So I'd strongly recommend that we dive deep into all of this. This is not much different from the eras that we've seen before. When technology comes, for example, all of our Brit friends will understand this easier. The factory system, on the one hand, gave affordable clothing, but it also meant child labor and urban blight. Okay, when steel, rails, and ships meant world trade and urbanization, but it also meant slave trade and colonialism. Okay, and electric and auto, when it came together, petroleum, affordable clothes, fertilizers, pharma, nylon, polyester, etc., but all kinds of other complications happen. So today the internet, as it's working its way through, is having pluses and minuses, and it's important to look at both, particularly since all of you are in the financial sector focused. Okay, I wanted to give you an example from the past. Okay, when I started working in Bombay after I graduated from the Indian Institute of Management in Calcutta, Bombay had 150 textile mills in 1971-72. Okay, in the next 10 years, all these 100-odd mills were destroyed, and close to 500,000 workers were unemployed in a 10-year period. And everyone blamed mill owners, politicians, but the key issue was nylon was invented. And these were all cotton textile mills. They didn't switch fast enough. People like my sister, who was in college those days, told our parents, if you don't buy me a nylon sari, I won't go to college. And cotton saris and shirts are seen to be only the province of, old men and women. Similarly, you're the most example of Gandhiji, the famous Mahatma Gandhi, was an ambitious young lawyer living in a apartment not far from where I'm living now in Bombay. And he heard of the so-called Champaran agitation in Bihar, where allegedly British landlords were extracting the juices out of Indian peasants who grew indigo for them. The reality is very different. What happened is in Champaran, where they were doing indigo and exporting it to people who wanted the color blue. In Germany, around the same time, 1880s, early 1900, indigo was synthesized. The moment it was synthesized, price dropped to 1/100th of it. Something similar to what is currently happening, because the transaction cost, thanks to algorithms, is now going to dive down to virtually nothing, and that will have a indigo type effect. And Gandhiji used this to blame the poor Brit planters and started his independence agitation from here. Similarly, in Calcutta, you will find that many people talk about the Naxalite movement. Most people don't realize that the key to the Naxalite movement was the invention of polypropylene. So that that area was full of jute growing and jute mills. And jute carpets were used to be the underlining for Europeans for their carpets, carpet backing. And polypropylene was invented that destroyed it. So we are in a similar process. So while there is lots of pluses to the technologies that we discussed, we have to very carefully and judiciously study the negatives and make sure that we don't end into a tragedy. A case in point, right now, one of the most brilliant breakthroughs in the last 2 to 3 years is something called word-to-vec. You must have heard about that breakthrough. It came from Google. And it allowed for the first time in the history of mankind to do arithmetical operations on text. For example, you enter king in your terminal minus man plus woman, it gives you the answer queen instantly. And this is seen to, word vectorization seen to a breakthrough. But again, you can try this for yourself. We put doctor and say minus man plus woman, it says nurse. It doesn't say lady doctor. And the reason for that is word2vec is created by creating all of Wikipedia and looking at the word connections between that. And every prejudice which is embedded inside that, like doctor minus man plus woman is nurse and not lady doctor, will get repeated. So you have to look at, well, I'm a super technology enthusiast, just watch out for, because this word2vec will be extensively used in a stock trade analysis. Huh? And this is possibly my last slide. I've, since if you're not familiar with it, I think some of these books will tell you about the network science and the code that I brief it. The innovator's dilemma, she tells you what kind of choices exist with you and what are the costs of accepting some of them. And the last was a shameless plug of the book I wrote called The Wave Rider. Okay, I'm done. How much time did I take?
You took just 15 minutes.
Oh, thank God, thank God, thank God for that.
But now we have, fortunately, and we're not going to let you go. We have half an hour for questions and answers.
I have a basic proof. I swear to myself, never have presentation more than 9 slides. Yeah. Okay.
So I'd invite my colleagues from the various panels and from the audience to please post your questions so that Ajit can respond. I have a question from Dr. Shanmugam.
Okay.
It is always, I'll read it out. It is always said that miscreants in super speed Ferraris can only be caught by the police in Ferraris. It's so relevant that in an algo era, we need super speed algorithms that can detect any manipulative efforts in markets. Are there firms converting the data graphs into regulatory inputs and finally into regulatory supervision software?
Yeah.
If such products are available, what are they?
Well, at the moment, what's available are the underlying software open source pieces like NetworkX. And believe me, somebody will productize it in the next 7 months to 1 year. But I can do it. As an experiment, I want to do it for NISM for free. I'm just for have fun. Yeah. A lot of people, we are all open source wallahs who love all innovation. We don't want to make money more than what we've already made. So it's okay. So these products will appear soon. It's an early one. I'm giving you an early signal. With NetworkX as a software was released only 4 months ago, the current version. So it is giving you a live update of what is possible. Extraordinary things are possible. You don't need 500, 600 people in a regulatory organization. You can do it with about 50 people. The rest will do all of this stuff. Yeah.
Also, so Dr. Shanmugam has added a little more. Also, how much are the inputs reliable for regulatory action? How much can it stand scrutiny?
You can, I think one of the challenges facing the tech community, particularly all of us who play with algorithms and write them, is there's a new code of behavior, which is a moral code. It's not a legal code. Moral code saying all algorithms must be explainable. Okay, so you like this, for example, if I had time and energy and etc., I would have added 5 more slides explaining what all it can give you, like degree centrality, gives you all the reasons why these nodes are linked. Okay, so it is explanatoriness is a very key component of it. So there's no mystery. It might look mysterious if you are not from a coding background, but I can take a 45-minute class and teach you all to code. Don't worry about it. Things. Yeah.
Could I build on Dr. Shanmugam's question? Your response was that there are people who can do this.
Yeah, I know in India, I know at least about 50 to 70 of them. If I know.
But in a regulatory context, how do you create a system that can do this in a regulatory context? How would you create a system that can do this coherently and cohesively and systematically towards the objectives of the regulator?
I think at the moment, the regulatory world, as far as I don't know much about them. I'm part of the NISM board for all of 3 weeks now, so I'm just learning every day. But I think, but I've run a public company before, so I think I know roughly. What we need to do is, there is a regulatory world working in the old relational database world, et cetera, et cetera. And the other side, there are these innovative techies which are playing with this all the time, who know the answer. We need to integrate the two of them in a way that, not just to make money. At the moment, what happens is you give it to one of the Indian body shopping companies, IT services companies, they'll convert it into a 1,000 crore fee project. I think a few of us will get together and show the first few examples which are successful, and after that, everyone will run after this. My suggestion, don't entrust it to IT services companies, where they will just put 1,000 people on a premise and keep billing you every year for 5 years. Get it done with a small bunch of five guys like me. I'm 72, all of them are younger, so they can work for 24 hours. I can work only 10 hours a day. So, okay, but it's not difficult to do. It's not difficult at all. Okay.
So we have a question in the Q&A box. Sir, this is from Mr. Vishnu Gupta. How can new age technology like blockchain and distributed ledgers be used for benefit of capital markets? Some examples.
You know, the fundamental thing about blockchain is that it's, as I told you, after the TCP/IP, you know, that's about it. The TCP/IP technology is what drives the internet, as you know. Blockchain is the next most important breakthrough which has come. But unfortunately, the first application they thought of was Bitcoin, which is a tragedy, because Bitcoin and all that type is and a kind of a, it looks as if shady guys in Dalal Street are playing with your money, you know. So, but unfortunately, you know, the blockchain method provides decentralized ledger system. And if you can convert a Bombay Stock Exchange and London Stock Exchange, and et cetera, to accepting blockchain and the decentralized ledger system, you will find that if anyone tries to play the fool on any transaction, you can be instantly nabbed, instantly. Apart from the fact that, quite apart from the negative side, it also will speed up the transactions. Okay, all this, today you do the transaction and settlement comes after 7 days and 2 weeks and all that. Settlement will be instantaneous. So it will reduce transaction costs. So I think blockchain is, I think it is God. It is really what, it's God's. I'm an atheist, so I was about to say it's God's answer to all our problems, but since I'm an atheist, I can't say that, yeah.
Dr. Vishnu Gupta had a follow-up component to his question related to the same general issue. How would you see this used in risk management and compliance area specifically?
I think I'm just, in this sheet which is in front of you, I'm just showing one graph database to establish that, you know, the relationship between the two transactors is captured here. So I think it's a, you know, you can, and combining this with blockchain, you can make sure that in blockchain, each transaction has its person ID, and you convert it into hexacode, as you know. I'm sorry, I'm talking jargon now, but you know, but I'm resisting from answering the question, how will you do, and something specific, because though I'm an entrepreneur and run public companies, etc., I've not, you know, looked at all at it deeply to see all the bad things that are going on in the stock market, right? Maybe one day Dr. Nair can brief me in NISM on all these things which I need to know so we can help. But I'm just alerting you that there are enormous new technical breakthroughs which have happened in the last 1.5 years, which can, you know, make the, you know, the flow of finance. I've learned quite a lot. I've got about 20 pages of notes from all your lectures today, incidentally. Yeah, and thank you all for that. I'm going to go and look up all the, you know, new ideas and make sure that that can get combined with technology to speedily accomplish the same goals that all of you are setting out. Okay.
I now have a question from Dr. Amil Das Gupta. He will be a panelist in a subsequent session. So let me just read it out. A broad question following up on Dr. Shanmugam for Ajit Ji. Perhaps other SEBI legal colleagues on the panel may wish to step in as well. Is there a legal structure basis that enables the use of algorithmic monitoring, if feasible, in regulatory punitive action?
Well, I don't know enough about how SEBI works and the law, so maybe one of our SEBI colleagues can answer that. I think my broad guess as a person who's dealt with cybercrime, every 10 days, somebody from the Indian Army comes visiting us and we help them out with some problems that they have. So it just that it's a quick way. These algorithms will quickly detect any wrongdoing and identify the people who are doing. Now, after that, you can verify yourself and probably use current law to take that forward. Algorithms by definition have to be explainable. Today in my circle, if you write an unexplainable result from an algorithm, then you're seen to be, oh God, you can't get your pass grade. We'll fail you.
Thank you. Perhaps in another, I'm not quite sure how the technology will work here, whether we can switch to another speaker, but let me carry on with the next question and we can bank that previous question for reflection on how we can best address it.
Yeah.
This question is from Mr. Paul Hudson. My question is mainly directed at our third and fourth speakers, so Peter and you, Ajit.
Okay.
Concerning the use of big data analysis, which is alluded to by both speakers.
Okay. Okay. What's the question?
Concerning the use of big data analysis, which is alluded to by both speakers. So it's an open question about the use of big data analysis in the regulatory field and in terms of Peter's area, in terms of the metrics, developing the metrics by which we assess regulatory effectiveness.
I'm sorry, what's the question? I heard that it alludes to big data.
So it's an open question about the use of big data analysis.
Yeah.
You had a slide on big data analysis. Its use in regulation.
Tremendous. There's tremendous applicability. What the first sewing machine, factory, not the factory system, but the spinning looms and all did for clothes and wearing affordable clothes and cotton weaving and so on. This is the same kind of breakthrough which is now going on. It will change the landscape completely. As a matter of fact, I'm planning to visit Manchester for the first time because when I write my book about big data and algorithms, I thought I'll walk through Manchester and just to pay tribute to those guys who started all that first, use of technology to speed up life.
Can I add something, Julius?
Yes, please, Peter.
Well, yes, I had a fair amount of experience of uses of big data in regulation, and I think it does connect with the Ferrari question, which I thought was a very good question. So let me just say a few things. So the first is that the regulators. I did two things in response to the rise of big data. One was recruit people into the economics team who had a different background, who were very focused on data usage and modern techniques of data usage. And the second, of course, was to get the software and storage facilities to go with this. And so for the first time, I think it was in 2016, we took a share of cloud from one of the big providers in order that we could manipulate very large data sets. And the work that I mentioned on the mortgage market, where it was necessary to compare thousands of products and see which was dominating which for particular users, of whom obviously there were millions, is very obviously a big data manipulation, which required an awful lot of thinking and very hard work by the researcher concerned. And that was one of the first times we used that sort of cloud technology. But also, I mean, the work that the FCA did on payday lending involved enormous data sets, which again were manipulated in ways previously I think regulators have not done. But it does bring us to the Ferrari question, because clearly the regulator can see what is going on in the academic world, it can see what's going on in the commercial world. It, by and large, it has some people who could be academics, but in general, academics are obviously more advanced in very specialist new techniques. And again, in the commercial world, there's a bigger budget in a major banking or tech company to acquire the best skills to do particular things. So the regulator is always a little bit catching up, which reminded me of this Ferrari question. And so I recruited, as I said, a lot of people who had a different background and were very tech savvy, very focused on big data. But I think it's true to say that all of the people that I recruited personally are now working in big tech companies like Amazon and Google and other ones, and Facebook, because of course those companies could pay them a lot more money to do similar things.
That's true. So, that's true. Yeah.
So if we come to the Ferraris, I think that you have to handicap the Ferrari of the corporate side a little bit. And this brings me to the question of the balance between detection and sanction. So if you need a Ferrari to detect what the guy in the other Ferrari is doing, that's fine. But just detecting isn't going to handicap him. You're always chasing. He's always in the lead in the race. So in a way, you want to stop him racing off so much. And that brings in this question of the balance between the detection and the sanction. Because if the sanctions are very light, he may think, well, it's entirely worthwhile for me to go off and do my race and you will never catch me. But if the sanction is much harsher, then you may say, well, actually, I, as the entrepreneur who wants to rush ahead and do something that maybe will damage consumers, I'm going to think twice because I don't want to end up in prison. And fascinatingly, after years of this sort of being known to the regulators but not doing much about it, the FCA in the UK is now, in fact, running a lot of criminal investigations. And I think that should get into the mind of the people who wish to manipulate, to use their skills to manipulate markets.
I think Peter, the points you make are right, but honestly, believe me, guys, you don't need a Ferrari. These things are not that expensive, I think you can, today, cloud computing services are virtually, nothing, cost peanuts from Amazon and Google and many others. Every day they're cutting each other's throat by reducing the price. So we should take care of it. And guys to do it, there are bright guys out of IIT Bombay, they will do it for you. Freshers, if you tell them, pose the problem correctly. I know them, I go and teach classes there from time to time. So, or I'm sure there are good guys in England as well, I don't know enough. But any of the IIT kids here will, if you post the problem and give them the data, they'll get it done in no time. It's not a Ferrari. What is a cheap car in England called? I have no idea. Model T, is it? Is it Model T? My dad used to have a Model T about 50 years ago. Doesn't need a Ferrari, you just need a Model T.
But it begs a question, Ajit and Peter, how much is human behavior? What's the balance between the human element and the technical, regulatory, legal element?
You see, on the regulatory issue, I'm a learner. I don't know enough, but I have, my long biodata. I was intimately involved in adding and amending the India IT Act, the Information Technology Act, and that I know quite a bit. Okay, I wrote some sections on the intermediaries, and I wrote it myself. Working with our fellow IAS officers, I see this as a public service. What in India we'll call, I'm a karma yogi, right? Somebody explained to Brit friends what that means, but anyway, okay. Incidentally, I see this thing saying talking Dr. Ajit, but I'm not doctor, I'm Mr. Ajit Balakrishnan. I don't have a PhD, so I don't want anyone to say, hey, Ajit, we saw you pretending to be a doctor. No, I'm Mr. All right. So it is not difficult at all. It is not difficult. Today, because of lack of time and everything, I've sort of condensed it, but I think we could sit and chat over a drink for half an hour, 45 minutes. I'll make you all very comfortable in how to look at algorithms. Not a big deal.
Thanks, Ajit. Jean-Pierre Zigrand has a question.
Yes, thank you. So I'm coming back to the Ferrari. I'm so sorry that we all talk about Ferraris. It's because we probably all wish we had one, and the best next thing is to talk about them. It is true that for many problems one can hire, people who are clever and hungry and so forth. But there are the elements where the Ferrari really is needed, like in high frequency trading, where trading is done in microseconds or nanoseconds now. And the limit order book is so fast, it's changing so quickly. The data is just unbelievably, large. And I know for a fact that in the UK, I mean, maybe that has changed, but I was a lead expert on this a while ago. And there was nobody in the UK, neither at the bank nor at the FCA, who was able to recreate the limit order book and be able to check whether anybody is doing some spoofing or some layering, because these algorithms are so quick and they are done on so many different exchanges and MTFs at the same time. And it is literally pretty much impossible unless millions and millions are invested into data and in computer science to actually be quick enough to pick up layering and spoofing strategies. It's a very, very complicated thing to do. And the only ones I know are the French. The French are running sort of a real-time check on whether layering and spoofing is happening, but it is an unbelievably complicated and costly endeavor, and most regulators, I think, haven't had the budgets to actually implement this properly.
I think taken people who are karma yogis, a person who does it for love of public service and of making sure that the securities are something which average middle class Indian or Englishman can invest without any fear of being cheated. That's a goal in life itself. Many people will work on that project and make sure you get it done. It was not going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars. And breakthroughs are happening to speed up things. Like this Network X, for example, can deal with, I think, 100 million row databases. And it's given me at least answers in about 2 seconds or 3 seconds. Things are changing dramatically. Very dramatically, particularly in the last 18 months to 24 months. So I hope I've whetted your appetite for investigating all of these things, and my job is done. Yeah? Yeah?
Can I make a quick comment on the JP's question about the spoofing? I don't know whether the FCA can do real-time monitoring at the moment. I somehow doubt it, but I actually don't know. But we did, in fact, successfully prosecute at least one case of spoofing by ex post construction of what was done. And of course, going back to the crime incentives and deterrence point, the fact that there was a successful prosecution might have caused others to think twice about spoofing again.
I think blockchain and distributed ledgers will stop the spoofing dead on the spot. Please study that. Okay, that you need that. Hexacoding is such that you cannot fool anyone. You need about 10 supercomputers to write it back and see who the person is, or to cheat, etc., etc. Things have changed. We have blockchain to thank. We have graphic databases to check, and yeah, so. Please study it. I'm more than happy to spell it out in more detail sometime, but today I think we are doing it at the policy level, so we won't bore people with computer code and all that.
Sure.
Okay. Are we done? Are we done? Yeah?
No, Ajit, not yet.
Hey.
We have you till 12 o'clock our time, London time. I hope that's okay with you.
What's that? I'm sorry?
We have you till 12 o'clock London time, which is about 10 minutes away.
Okay, my dog is pestering me, saying, Ajit, you're talking too long. Please come and cuddle me.
We have a big dog here also causing us a lot of trouble. This is a follow-up question from Paul Hudson, who, remember a moment ago, had raised the issue of big data. So yeah. I'll read out his question, which is embedded in a para which summarizes thinking. As I understand it, and so far nobody at an AI gig has disputed my understanding, big data analysis involves recording simultaneously the respective magnitudes of many hundreds of observations on several variables, and then seeing whether there are any discernible patterns in the movements of all, or of a subset thereof, the variables. If there does seem to be a pattern, namely high correlations between any of the variables, then big data analysis attempts to draw conclusions from these correlated variables. And it is this procedure which strikes me as unscientific. To people like me, who subscribe to a Karl Popper's philosophy, one should first formulate a hypothesis or set of hypotheses, and only then collect data on the variables that feature in it.
You're right. I think it's one of the big efforts in any of these. I hate the word big data, so I won't use it, but one of the first things to do is to have a model in your head, okay? Based on, you take a 5% sample of the full data, use that to model and see how you can reduce. Normally you start with having 1 million or 500 million variables. There are known ways even in 19th century statistics, there were ways of reducing variables by removing autocorrelated ones. But today there are even better methods. So you reduce the variables, build the model, then test it on a bigger sample, and finally run it on the full data to see whether it's still holding, whether they're, so there are easy methods to do it. Unfortunately, I think the IT services people have started billing such big amounts that all of you are disillusioned and think of calling it a Jaguar. It needn't be just two or three bright young kids in their 20s and one person helping them with the data. That's all you need to solve all of these problems.
Thank you, Ajit. John Danielson, one of the co-directors of the Systemic Risk Center, wanted to ask a question. John.
Okay.
So thank you very much. I was thinking about this big data and the connection with Karl Popper you mentioned earlier. The big data analysis does not have to be any more or less scientific than traditional statistical analysis. The main difference is in traditional analysis, the statistician brings prior knowledge, while in big data, you discover that with a training sample. So they are sort of roughly equivalently scientific. The problem with big data in the context of financial regulations is that it doesn't deal properly with causality. So you can find patterns. So if you want to find patterns of abuse in customer data or order book data, big data is probably ideal for that, since you can let an algorithm loose on it, guided by artificial intelligence, and you can find patterns and abuse that no human could possibly do. So that's a big advantage. And then you can verify it afterwards to see if you actually found the right things. So you sort of get rid of the big problem with its algorithms making decisions. The problem is, since you can't do causality, when it comes to higher order questions like financial stability, that is when big data does not work properly, since so many of the drivers of instability are hidden. They are not in the data sample. And I think the main challenges of financial stability and systemic risk is the fact that we simply don't observe what matters. We observe what is irrelevant. And neither traditional statistical analysis nor big data can help us with that.
Well, it is not the bigness of data that will help, but the creativity with which you guess at a model, test it and see whether it works. in my talk, I'd put this screen, which looks a little frivolous, king ban is man plus woman equal queen. But I think the bigger point on that, and the links are at the bottom there, is that, your conclusions are as good as the data you have. So you must spend quite a bit of time to make sure that the data is not inherently biased in one way or the other. If that is the meaning of this slide, So I think I don't worry about big data and things. My strongest suggestion is that look at the new things going on like Network X and graph databases and things of that kind. That changes the way we look at data. The old relational database system, you put some 1 billion pieces of data, the whole thing will come to a halt. But I think today the relationship between pieces of data are also recorded. So I think it's an impending breakthrough. I think, and it should not cost tons of money. I think get some bright young kids and they'll start doing this. I'm sorry. Okay, it's not that frightening. The bigness of the data should not frighten any of us. So I promise you. Take a small sample, build a model, and then extend it. Take 5 or 6 months. Some of that is traditional statistics. But use the newer techniques like graph databases and things that will help you more than relational databases and things of that kind.
Thanks, Ajit.
Okay.
Peter, would you like to add anything?
I actually pretty much agree with what John said. I was going to say something along similar lines, so I think I won't add anything.
Okay, done then, Julius?
We still have 5 minutes, Ajit. Okay. Is your dog acting up?
Dog is looking there, staring at me, saying, "How long will you take?"
No, I have no more questions listed out here. Are there any final comments that you and Peter would like to make? Ajit, would you like to say? I mean, you've heard all that.
From my side, yes, I enjoyed the questions. I look forward to playing, as I said, as a pure karma yogi. I think, Julius, please explain karma yogi to our British friends. To explain with it,
to assist that process.
You have to, hey, what kind of an Indian father you have? Didn't tell you what a karma yogi is. Karma yogi is a person who does hard work only for the benefit of society and never for any personal gain, either fame or money or any popularity, nothing. You just do it for the benefit of society. That's a karma yogi. Yeah.
In the meantime, John would like to add another quick comment, and then I'll come back to Peter in case he has any further to add.
Yeah.
I'm working on the assumption that we still have time in this session. I do not want to delay us unnecessarily, but I was thinking in this discussion on metrics and measurement is that one unfortunate consequence of measurement is that it drives us to short-termism. So it drives the decision makers to look at what's in front of them, which is the data they have, which may then cause them to miss on long-term consequences. So in other words, the more data we have, the more risk dashboards we have, the more sophisticated databases we have, the more technology we have. I think the unfortunate consequence of that is to drive us to the short term. And that applies to regulators, fund managers, and most other market participants. So when it comes to the important questions like, will my pension fund pay out in 30 years, or will financial stability hold, or questions of that nature, we need to find a way to step away from data and look at the deeper causes of what destroys performance in the long term. And in a way, I sort of, even though I work in the data space, and this is what I teach and I work on, as the more I work with data, the more I fear it misleads us and drives us away what matters most.
Quick comment, Ajit and Peter?
No, I think we just have to be all karma yogis and do the right thing so that the securities are seen to be, for middle class and lower middle class people, a safe place for them to put their savings, and they should never lose or get cheated. That is a Karma Yogi way of wanting to do work. Yeah. Okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well,
Yeah.
I've got some sympathy with what John said, but I think there's a couple of observations as well, maybe 3 observations. So one is, yes, it's easy to imagine short-term metrics being designed which have perverse effects, and metric design is clearly very important. And so I would say that it's important to think about some very big picture metrics, such as the way in which the financial sector serves the real economy, because that in the end is what matters, and that may help with John's problem, which is a real problem.
Yeah.
The second one is that, because my thesis is that the short-termism is actually driven in large part by the fact that the regulators have no defense when they are criticized, and they get beaten around, and regulation is made more complex because they couldn't point out that they were actually doing some good things. And so, in a way, we already have short-termism without the metrics, and without the metrics, we have regulators who lack credibility. And then the third thing is, if you look at the 70 years of British experience that I described, it's just been lurching from one crisis to another, and one sort of rethink of regulation to another at great expense, without any evidence that it was actually useful to do all that rethinking. So I say that the status quo needs to be broken.
Thank you, Peter. Unfortunately, time is up.
Okay.
And it just remains for me to thank our 2 speakers very, very much, Ajit and Peter, for your time and your thoughts, and for taking the trouble to answer actually quite challenging questions. So I'll conclude this session, and with again, my thanks to everyone, plus those who asked the questions and made the comments, and to invite all of you to come tomorrow morning at the same time, same place, for sessions 3 and 4 of this program. Thank you very much.
All the best, guys. Thank you for inviting me. Bye-bye.